y'all exist in these echo chambers for so long that you forget that there are experiences and ideas that are different from you.
I'd rather keep it real with ya.
Hey guys, it's me, Minu, back with another video. As you guys know, I was recently diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. So, officially out there, diagnosis, I am autistic. Yay, I guess. Um, I guess I'm yay for more representation. I got all the A's, and it was so funny that my therapist and I were talking about it. She was like, "You have a lot of A's." I was like, I do. I'm atheist, I'm asexual, I'm autistic. It's like all over the place, but it's where we are now. So I figured I'd continue talking about autism a bit more. I've been in the autism subreddits, I've been in the autism and women subreddits. I've seen a lot of overlapping things. A lot of people complaining about relationships. I can't relate. But one of the things that I saw was someone being like, oh, autism made me asexual. Like my autism caused asexuality. And I was like, even here, even here. Come on, y'all. Come on. Why do we keep doing this? Um, though I'm not surprised though, because asexuals online, y'all are a lot. And it's weird to say, it's like I'm asexual, I'm also online, but it's just like y'all are a lot. And I don't think y'all realize how a lot you are because so many asexual communities are like echo chambers, and a lot of communities online are echo chambers at this point. But like I see even from the comments from my previous videos about like asexuality, y'all exist in these echo chambers for so long that you forget that there are experiences and ideas that are different from you. And I see a lot of these statements that are purely based off the echo chamber these people exist in versus like a broader range. Like I like to be a part of multiple communities. I like to be in communities that are mostly white men, communities that are mostly Asian people, communities that are mostly black people, communities that are ace people, communities that are allosexual kink people. I like to be in all of the groups because I like to learn from different perspectives and see how people think. Um, like example, I like the anti-work community. Yeah, in the bathroom doing stuff. Anyway, I'll read stuff from the anti-work community. I also read stuff from like the HR community. And those two things sometimes they go together, sometimes they don't go together. Um, but I always like hearing and reading about people whose ideas are different, whether I agree with it or not. Sometimes I see shit, I'm like, damn, you know? Um, but I'm still reading it because I don't want to live in an echo chamber. And a lot of people who are asexual who are online are in echo chambers, and I find that I get along well with asexual people who just don't even participate in those communities anymore because of how far the echo chamber goes. Because what happens when you're in echo chamber for long enough, like I said, you forget that people think differently. So people will be in these echo chambers of trans people or trans lesbians or non-binary people or ace people or bisexual people, and they will get to a point where in their mind, y'all stop playing in the bathroom. Little stop playing in them drawers. They're doing zoomies because now they ate lunch, so they're doing zoomies. Anyway, especially Sadie. But as I was saying, you get to a point where you think that everybody is beyond something. So for example, you spend so much time in the trans lesbian community. You get to a point where you think everybody's already cool with trans people, everybody's already cool with lesbians, everybody's already cool with trans lesbians. We're good, we can move on to something else, or we can critique trans lesbians because that's the norm and everybody accepts trans lesbians now. Now, obviously, we know that ain't true because the Republicans are going hog fucking wild, um, doing everything they can in the government to persecute and eliminate trans people. But this is an example, and I'm not saying this is exactly what happens in trans communities. So I'm not a trans person, but I'm just using that as kind of an example of people can live in an echo chamber and they can forget what's going on around them because the people that they speak to day in and day out agree with them wholeheartedly and think that everything's great. And then when they leave that area, or they watch a video, or they see a Facebook post or something on Instagram that is the opposite of that, they are incredibly offended and incredibly confused. And I've watched the interactions from these people who step out of their echo chamber and then they try to interact with people who don't agree with them. And the way they interact, it just seems a little bit like they don't fully understand the fact that that other person has an issue with them on a fundamental level. Like they're coming from a place of like, oh, already you accept all of these things, right? And now we're going to talk about this thing. And then a person be like, no, I don't accept those basic things that, I don't accept those things that you consider basic and a given. It's not a given for me. And then they're confused because you can't talk about this if you don't accept that. And then they lose these arguments and they lose these debates, and then they make their people look even more ridiculous, or they validate the opinions of the people who don't like them. And I say all that to say we get a lot of this in the asexual community where people think that they are beyond the basics of asexuality, that everybody already accepts asexuals. We don't do this, we don't do that, we are like this. And now we can challenge it, we can skew it, we can add different colors and flavors to it and do all of this extra stuff, not realizing that the majority of people still don't even think asexuality is a real thing. So if you're coming from a place where you think everybody already knows what asexual is and they already accept it as it is, and now we're just gonna, sprinkle a little here and there, change some things up, and then you go out and you talk to people who don't even believe that asexuality is a real thing, you look crazy. And you don't know how to argue with those people, so you get angry and you start yelling stuff and you don't make any sense, because then you realize all of this skewing and twisting of your ideologies make you sound like a crazy person to the people you're talking to. And that's why when I speak about asexuality, I speak very specifically and I say the definition of asexuality is you do not experience sexual attraction, full stop. That's it. There's no qualifiers, there's no contingencies, there's no conditions. Have I used all the words? You know what I mean? There's nothing extra to this, okay? If you are asexual, you do not experience sexual attraction. I don't want to hear about what happens during the day. I don't want to hear about kink. I don't want to hear about romance. I don't want to hear about safety and trauma. You do not experience sexual attraction. That is the baseline. I establish that as my baseline, and then we go from there. When your baseline is asexuality is anyone who says that they're asexual, that's not a solid foundation to work off of. And that's why y'all be looking crazy when y'all trying to argue with people online. I'm just telling you. Let you know right now. I know you don't like me. That's why people don't respect you, because your baseline, your foundation of your arguments are not sound. And you refuse to make them solid because you don't want to invalidate anybody. And so you just end up making everyone in the asexual community look bad. Okay. Now that I've gotten all of that out of the way, back to the person who said that autism caused their asexuality. I made a comment basically saying, I don't agree with that, but go off, sis. I can't change. I'm not going to argue with you about why you should believe this way or that way about yourself, but I will just say, like, I don't agree. And that's about as far as I go with people. Like I said, I don't argue all the time. And they were like, I'm pretty sure that my autism influenced my asexuality, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, that may well be true. I noticed when I was participating actively in asexual communities that there were a lot of autistic people. Now, I didn't know what autism was, but now knowing what it is and understanding it, I do see why you would see a large number of non-binary, aromantic, and asexual autistic people, because when it comes to neurodivergence in general, your brain works differently. And just like I've spoken about how your romantic orientation works a different way in your brain than your sexual orientation, it's the same way with gender. When you do not conform to social norms, when you do not understand, like if something, like my therapist says this all the time, right? If something doesn't make sense to you as an autistic person, it's bullshit. Moving on. There's a lot of things that are social constructs that don't make sense to us. So if you have an issue with the social constructs of gender, if you have an issue with the social constructs of romantic and platonic relationships, it makes sense that you are going to identify as something outside of that. So as a agender or gender fluid or non-binary or aromantic. And I will say that, and I'm not a neuroscientist by any means, I can understand how neurodivergence and your brain literally being wired differently than neurotypical people could result in you identifying as asexual, aromantic, all of those things. Do I know that for sure? Fuck no. Do I want to claim that as a certainty? Absolutely not. Because we are not at a point where we can say this, that, or another caused asexuality. One, there's not enough studies on it. That's for one. But two, I'm still hearing commercials about class action lawsuits because somebody took Tylenol where they were pregnant or got a vaccine while they were pregnant and the child had autism. If we're still at a point where people are suing over their children being autistic, do you really think that we're at a point where we could say autism caused asexuality? Again, these people in their echo chambers, these people in their autism echo chambers, where there's all these asexual autistic people and aromantic autistic people, in their minds, it just makes sense to say shit like this. But that's not a good thing to broadcast outside of those communities. It may make sense in that community to say that because there are other autistic asexual people who may think, yeah, that makes sense. I'm autistic, I'm asexual. Sure, but that makes no sense outside of that community. Like, even when I told my friend's mom, she's a boomer, but she's super nice. Even when I told my friend's mom that I was getting tested for autism, that I was being evaluated, she was like, well, everybody got something wrong with them. You know, there's still people, and this hasn't happened to me, but there's still people who say that psychologists and therapists call them artards when they tell them that they're autistic. But you want to go around saying autism caused your asexuality? No, I'm not down with it. And just because you happen to be both doesn't mean that they cause each other. Correlation does not equal causation. You should have learned this at least in high school. If you didn't, I'm sorry, but now you know. There's a lot of things that happen at the same time, but that doesn't mean they caused each other. You know, saying that a tree fell and then saying that all the wild cats in a zoo got loose doesn't mean the tree falling caused the cats to get loose. It means those two things happen at the same time. Now, if you can do some studies to show that the tree falling and it fell in a certain way that allowed for the cats to use the tree to get out of the you have to dig deeper than that, right? You can't just say these two things happen at the same time, therefore they are cause and effect. It's not how it works. Um, and so those are my like general feelings. Again, I understand why people might think that, but we're not at a place where we can make those claims. And as I always say about everybody else who says this caused asexuality, this caused asexuality, this caused asexuality, where's the research? Where's the study? Because if we don't have research on it, I ain't trying to hear what you got to say. I understand people want to be like, this is my experience, and that's cool. You can tell your experience, but you cannot make these blanket statements because, once again, not every autistic person is asexual. So if autism causes asexuality, why are there straight, gay, and bi autistic people? Make it make sense. The only way for you to make these claims would have to be an overwhelming amount of people in the autism on the autism spectrum who are asexual. Like if 60% of autistic people are asexual, I can see where you got that from. But that's not true. It looks like that. It looks like when you're in your specific community and on Tumblr, Facebook, Reddit, Discord, it looks like there are a lot of people who are non-binary, who are autistic, who are aromantic. It looks like that, but that's not true. If you go in a group that is for asexual people who want to date, you're going to find a large amount of people who are alloromantic and asexual. If you go into an aromantic group, you're going to find a good amount of people who are aromantic, asexual, but also a good amount of people who are aromantic and allosexual. That's why it's important to not live in an echo chamber. But a lot of y'all don't do that. And that's why you fall for stuff like back in my video about asexual micro labels, where you are trying to put labels and attractions to everything. Just because you get horny at night does not mean you are a brand new version of asexuality. You're just somebody who gets aroused at night. Just because you don't have a libido does not mean that you are asexual. You're just someone who has no libido. But in your mind, because you are surrounded by only asexuals, and there are asexuals who are sex repulsed, and there are asexuals with low libidos, you think that these things caused each other. But if you step out of that, you'll find that there are a lot of allosexual people who have low libidos, who have erectile dysfunction, who have all types of conditions. Trans people on hormones, it affects their libido. You would find that if you expose yourself to a lot more people, but y'all live in echo chambers. So when I was in preparation for this video, I've already ranted long enough. I decided to go do some searching. I said, well, let me see, because I always say if there's no studies about it, I'm not trying to hear no definitive statements about people's sexuality. So I did find a study from I forget what you call these people, the National Library of Medicine, National Center for Biotechnology Information. So that ncbi.nlm.nih.gov. It's a .gov a site. But those of you who like to look at research know what I'm talking about, because they always come up, and it's a government site. They do their actual research. And so it was looking at asexual identity among individuals on the high functioning autism spectrum. Why they chose specifically high functioning, I'm not exactly sure, but I guess, maybe to narrow things down a little bit, because again, it's a wide ass fucking spectrum. So I guess looking at it from just one end of the spectrum helps them get more accurate results, which is cool. So basically, their whole thing, why they decided to do this research study, and it's just one, mind you. It's not like they surveyed 100,000 people, but the reason they decided to do it was because they were seeing that there were a lot of autistic people or neurodivergent people who were saying they were asexual, and they were like, "Hey, is there what's going on here? Like maybe we need to look into that," which is great, right? I love that. Um, but there's just not a lot of study on it. And there's some stuff in here about like people who are neurodivergent see the world differently, understand social constructs and rules differently, interact with the world differently, which can lead to a higher percentage of them identifying as non-binary, asexual, aromantic, all types of things. Because if the social construct doesn't fit, then you just identify something outside of that, is what it is. So they tested adults with high functioning ASD, and they recruited them from like these online communities of people with ASD. Yeah, it was a very small percentage. So of the people in the autism groups that they recruited from, only 5% of that group identified as asexual, and that was like 17 people. And then they said, but 9 of the 17 people who identified as asexual also identified as having sexual attraction, experiencing sexual attraction. So, oh, hey, Morticia, you see her right there. Um, so they were like, what do we do with this? Because asexuality is supposed to be this is another issue, right? When you're trying to do a scientific study, when you're trying to do research and you're allowing people to self-identify, the asexual community is so fucking confused. They don't even all agree on what it means to be asexual. So they'll be like, yes, I'm asexual, but also I experience sexual attraction. Well, you messing up the results. And maybe this is me because I am a big science nerd, even though I couldn't hack it in the neuroscience world. It was very, very difficult. But these are the things that my brain thinks about. Like when you go to study something like asexuality, what is your baseline? What is your control? If you're if the population that you are surveying doesn't understand the question, then your results don't mean anything. So already I think it's interesting that 5% of the people that they recruited from the autism groups claim to be asexual, which is only 17 people. And then of those 17 people, 9 people who claim to be asexual also said they experienced sexual attraction. So I was like, okay, here we go. And then they gave them open-ended responses to like clarify what they meant. And basically people were talking about lack of desire to be in relationships. That's why they said they were asexual. Lack of desire to engage in sexual activity. They couldn't get an accurate result because when people talked about what asexuality meant to them, it was all different stuff. I did think it was interesting that they called out specifically a lack of sexual desire, and then a lack of skill when it comes to engaging in interpersonal relationships as the reasoning. And this is something that I've noticed too, where some people they will say that when they say they're asexual, that means they don't want to date. Like they would put that as that's what people should understand when I tell them that. And not necessarily, because now if you said you were aromantic, I would expect people to say, "Oh, you don't want to date." And if you're somebody who's aromantic and you do want to date, that's a qualifier that you got to explain. But if you are aromantic, it makes sense that you wouldn't want to be in a romantic relationship. So I can understand people understanding that. But I've seen a lot of situations where, particularly women talking to aggressive men, will say, I'm asexual as a way to make them say, oh, I don't want to be in a relationship or I don't want to date you, as opposed to just saying, I'm not interested in dating you. And I don't know why they think that that's a good defense, especially against like heterosexual men. Like, of all the guys who I've said I was asexual to, or even been on dating sites where I just wrote that, they either don't know what it means, they think that you're lying, they think that they can convince you otherwise, or they will assume that they're not going to get any sex from you, therefore they don't want to deal with you and they leave. Um, but instead of all of that, going through all of those motions, I could literally just say like, I don't want to have. Before I even identified as asexual, I would tell guys, I'm not going to have sex with you. I'm not. That's my line. It's not going to happen now. It's not going to happen in the future. You can't convince me. That's not going to happen. And that's like a very clear, direct statement, especially if you're talking to someone online and there is no potential for them to like react in a negative way where you might be in danger. You can literally just be like, I'm not interested in sex with anybody right now or in the future. But it's stuff like that where I see like there's still a fundamental misunderstanding of asexuality, because asexuals does not automatically equal I don't want to date people or I'm not interested in a relationship right now. Those are different things. Also the lack of desire. Like I've already said this earlier in the video. Lack of desire for sex is not the same thing as asexuality. You can have a high libido and be asexual and not find anyone to be sexually attractive because you are not sexually attracted to people. Uh, Why I feel like I said that weird. You don't experience sexual attraction. Let me say it like that. That sounded kind of weird the other way, but I'm lucky that I know some people who like they change their birth control. Now their libido is up, but they still don't want to have sex with anybody, or they get a celebrity crush that they really like and they're just obsessed with them, but they do not want to have sex with that person. If that person came to talk to them, they would not want to have sex with them because they don't experience sexual attraction. Now, you can still think someone's cute. You can still think someone has like an amazing vibe, that they're really cool and that you just love them and you want to have a poster of them in your room. But it doesn't mean you want to have sex with them because you're not sexually attracted to them. Also, you can have sex with someone without being sexually attracted to them. How do you think that lesbians and gay people had children before we got to a point where we could do insemination. You know what I mean? They did it to have the children that they wanted to have. There are heteromantic asexual women who are willing to have sex in order to have children, and that's okay. Now, I know some people, I've had some people in comments say before, like, um, if you don't experience sexual attraction, then your body shouldn't react to that at all. And honestly, that just sounds like somebody who don't understand how reproductive organs work, because your body can react to stuff even if you don't want it to react to stuff. And I'm not going to go down that hole, but if you know, you know. Um all asexuality means is that you don't experience attraction. If you do experience attraction but you're not interested in dating right now, that's a different thing. If you do experience attraction but only with a certain race of people, that's a different thing. If you do experience attraction, but only with, skinny people, it's a different thing. And it's like, it's so funny because I know people are going to be in the comments talking shit like it's not the same. Why are you comparing that to demisexuals or blah 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 blah? And I'm like, the same logic y'all use to create all these new attractions and all these new sexual orientations that you want to jam under the asexual umbrella is going to be the exact same logic that people are going to use for their sexual preferences. And instead of calling them preferences, they're going to call them orientations like y'all are doing. And what is your argument? Oh, you can't say that because it's offensive? It doesn't matter. Logically speaking, the same logic y'all use to come up with all these new labels is the same logic that bad actors are going to use when they say, my sexual orientation is, I don't know, insert some fancy Latin word for white people, and then say, so I can only have sex with white people. I'm only attracted to white people. You can't call me racist. It's my sexual orientation. I can't control it. They're going to do the same thing. Sorry, I'm just going on a tangent about this. But my point being, you cannot say autism causes asexuality. You cannot say asexuality causes autism. Even if it may seem like there are a lot of people who have autism who also are asexual, doesn't mean that you can say that one causes the other. We simply do not have the right studies. Even this study says that you're going to have to literally ask a bunch of questions on the front end when you do research on this, because of the fact that people can't narrow down what asexuality actually means. So it's going to be a long time before we even able to have accurate studies on this, because of the fact that people can't agree on what asexuality means. And so even if they do come out with a study that says this many people are asexual, this many people are autistic asexual, I'm just going to be dubious, because if it's coming from, just open sourced, asking anybody who identifies with it, and you're not asking the question of, okay, you say you're asexual, but what does that mean to you? And then dividing people based off those responses, it won't be an accurate result. So, yeah, like I always say, if there isn't studies on it, is if there isn't research on it, you cannot claim that it's a definitive thing. Maybe you feel like these things are connected for you and good for you, yourself. You can't claim that for other people, though. And you can't put that out there as a thing that is just true and happens, because unless every single person, or 60 to 75% of people who are autistic also identifies this other thing, you can't make those claims. Is it, you know, so that's all I want to say about that. It's just a problem. It bothers me. I've told people multiple times to stop saying that certain things cause asexuality. We have enough stigma with the A's. We have enough people who don't believe in asexuality. We have enough people who believe autism is some horrible, awful thing that your parents screwed you on, or your parents should have never got the vaccine because now you're autistic. We have enough nonsense on both ends to further complicate it by lumping those two things together. Because I'm going to tell you exactly what those people who hate autistic people do. They also hate asexual people. They probably don't even know asexuals exist. But the second you correlate those to them, you know what they're going to do? They're going to be even more upset, because they're going to be like, oh my God, not only did you screw your child up by getting a vaccine and then giving them autism, you also made it so they'll never have a normal life, because they also can't whatever you told them asexuality meant. So they also can't have a relationship, or they also can't have children, even if they're autistic. It's going to breed a whole new crop of stereotypes about autistic people and asexual people. You're literally hurting both communities at this point. Please sit down. That's all I want to say. Hope you guys are enjoying your Sunday. Like I always say, take care of yourself because you deserve it. Drink your water, eat your food, take your naps. Because I mean, can't nobody nap for you. You can watch them. You can watch them videos of people eating all that food, but can't nobody eat for you or drink water for you. You got to do it for yourself. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.